Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, J Gilbo 11. With me is Nick Tasso at the Inefficient 2. Taking a look at pitching on tonight's slate, which, you and I kind of differ. You're not really a big fan of this slate. I can understand why.
Yeah, there's really nothing clear cut out there on this slate, and you can kind of go either way. I think it's more geared towards hitters, if anything, but there are still a few guys starting-wise you could throw in there and feel confident with.
Yeah, definitely. And this first one here, Tampa Bay and Kansas City, Danny Duffy versus Chris Archer. And talking about Danny Duffy, I mean, obviously the strikeout rate has been very solid this year. And I think that is one thing where I think Duffy could have some potential in the strikeout department, but the Rays are also very good against left-handers. The front five of that lineup with Geyer, Forsythe, Longoria is something that is very tough to kind of deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. This game's kind of a tough one for me to really figure out. It's in a good ballpark for pitchers, but just one of those things. This offense for Tampa Bay, it can really hit lefties, like you said. So I'm probably shying away with Danny Duffy here, even though he does have a pretty good upside with the strikeout potential.
Yeah, definitely. And Archer on the other side, I mean, I don't mind Archer. He's been really solid at home, 2.95 ERA compared to over a 5 ERA on the road. And Archer's been a guy who came around, I mean, really strong start in Coors, strong start at Dodger Stadium. And Archer's just a matter of if he makes it through the trade deadline, I guess, because, I mean, there is potential that he moves and doesn't even start today.
Yeah, true. I absolutely like him on this slate. His price is pretty nice on both sites, so I don't mind him. And you look at this Kansas City offense, and they're really not what they used to be. They don't grind out at bats as they once did. And I just think right now he's getting them in a good little matchup.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I mean, Archer, the problem has been the home runs, but, at Tropicana, that's a little bit better. And this Royals team, I mean, they're next to the Braves and ISO against right-handed pitching. I mean, they haven't really been a power team. So I think this sets up for a good matchup for Archer. I'm not quite with it on FanDuel and cash games, but DraftKings, I certainly can play them there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you there. And like you said, the home runs are the problem. And there's really not too much pop out of a few guys, except out of a few guys on this Kansas City team.
Yeah, definitely. Twins and Indians next year, Jose Barrios versus Danny Salazar. I'm a big fan of Salazar on tonight's slate. I think, a pretty solid favorite there. There is some strikeouts upside against this Minnesota team that has a high strikeout rate against righties, ninth highest in the league. And Salazar, I mean, I think he's had a couple of blow-ups of late where he hasn't been great, but overall a fairly consistent arm this season.
Yeah, I agree with you there. You look at most of his games, and he's been pretty solid. So I don't mind deploying him here. Minnesota is kind of one of those offenses where you can really target against. They're not going to do too much against a starting pitcher on most nights. So I don't mind him here. If he was a lefty, then this would be a different story because the Twins hit lefties pretty well. But I definitely don't mind him here. The ballpark is still pretty favorable for him.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think if you're looking for a clear-cut winner, it's him over Archer just on FanDuel. So I kind of rather spend up the extra 1,000 for that win. I think, he'll be backed with some nice run support. I mean, obviously Barrios, I mean, a good prospect, but hasn't shown anything to make me kind of want to use him, especially in this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Barrios he could get hit hard here. His issue too earlier when he was up with the season was he was giving up a lot of home runs and walks, and that's something definitely that Cleveland likes to do a lot. So I think he could be in trouble in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that Cleveland, I mean, really 1 through 8 is such a deep lineup to get through. When you got guys like Rajai Davis, Chisenhall, Nyquin at the back end, it's like, those guys would be up in the order elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be a easy matchup for Barrios at any spot in this lineup. So he's going to struggle and probably labor through a lot of this game.
Yeah, definitely. Yankees and Mets next one here. CC Sabathia versus Logan Verrey. Sabathia, I mean, kind of a deep tournament option. I just think if Cespedes sits out of that lineup, I mean, you take him out of the middle, not really a good Mets team against lefties either way. They've been pretty mediocre, 23rd in WOBA, high strikeout rate, 22.5%. I don't know. I mean, there could be something here as an SP2 or even a cheap single, fire entry on FanDuel. I mean, I don't mind kind of paying down there and using him for some bats.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at FanDuel and his price is only $6,800, so I definitely like him there. Like you said, probably a couple of GPPs, but I wouldn't go crazy on him. Definitely not safe for cash, but It's just this Mets offense has been really poor lately, and I just really enjoy targeting them, especially against the lefty, just because most of their good hitters or hitters that'll do some decent damage are lefties, and CC Sabathia can kind of neutralize them.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side, I mean, Logan Veray, I mean, cheap, but in comparison on FanDuel, he's only 100 less than Sabathia. I kind of rather roll him. And I know he's cheap on DraftKings. I mean, just 4,800, but I don't see the need to steep down that low. I know the Yankees offense isn't special, but I think he's going to have a little bit of a trouble with the front five in that lineup.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't mind. I'd probably wait to see the lineup that the Yankees put out, but I think on DraftKings he might be okay, just depending on the lineup. If they do trade a couple guys early on in the day, and you have a lot of players who just aren't the same caliber of players. I know a lot of the starters on the Yankees are kind of old and aren't too good, but if you have an inexperienced lineup out there after a few guys get traded, I wouldn't mind Verrett in this situation.
Yeah, that's definitely something that could be true. I mean, you could be missing a Beltran or a McCann or something like that in the middle of that lineup. Definitely make it more appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. You take one or two of those guys out, and that's just one less experienced hitter that Verrett has to go against.
Yeah, definitely. Marlins and Cubs next year. Kyle Hendricks versus Adam Conley. Hendricks was a guy. I mean, he's basically. I'm not using Marlins against him. I would like to use him tonight, but I don't think price considered that I really am. I think I'd rather just spin up to Archer. Given that the fact that they're in that type of range. So I love Hendricks tonight, but I just think the price is a little bit higher than I like.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He's a decent option. It's just when he's around other people price wise, you just kind of have to go with them. And this Miami team kind of could have a good outing. We've seen that a couple weeks ago against the Cubs starters. They hit them pretty well. So I'm actually staying away from both starters in this game.
Yeah, I'm definitely staying away from Conley. You look at the Cubs, I mean, pretty solid against lefties. They don't strike out as much as they used to. Third in the league in WOBA. So, yeah, I'm with you. Conley's pitched relatively well of late, is a cheap guy, but I think if I am kind of spinning down, I'm doing it against a worse offense like the Mets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen a lot of games where Chicago's really been pretty bad, but they still have those offensive explosion games that you never want to have a pitcher on in DFS going against them.
Yeah, definitely not. Next one here, you got the Blue Jays and Astros, Marcus Stroman versus Doug Fister. And this one, I mean, Marcus Stroman, he's probably the deep GPP guy that I probably might regret come the end of the night using. But he's kind of either on or he's off, and that's the same thing with this Houston offense. I mean, we saw Mike Pelfrey go out there and throw a quality start against him, as many stacked against. So I like the strikeout upside. I mean, Houston 24% against righties. So I don't mind, Stroman if you can kind of contain some of that lefty power.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of potential here with Stroman, but there's also a lot that could go wrong. I think it's the same story every time with the Houston Bats. They could be absolutely quiet the entire game and strike out 10 times, or they could kind of go off. So it's just one of those things. Good starting pitchers or even mediocre starting pitchers could always have a good outing against them.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at Stroman, I mean, if we're speaking DK scoring 420-point DK games in the last 10, but also 5 single-digit performances. I mean, that's just the floor and ceiling this guy has. So I think it scares a lot of people away. I think in that ballpark, it should certainly scare people away. So I'm kind of hoping to get him at lower ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really don't mind him on this slate with everyone else considered, but I'm definitely not jumping at playing him, and I'm sure most people aren't.
No, I don't think so either. And obviously just beware of the floor. It is single digit-esque. I mean, that's where it sits.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's definitely, I know we didn't mention it, but it should go without saying that he's definitely not cash game viable. So.
No, definitely not. And on the other side, Doug Fister, I know he's cheap, but I'm not really looking to use him. He's been fairly tough on righties this year, but I just think, you look at this offense, he's probably going to have a tough time getting through most of it and for any sort of real upside.
Yeah, I mean, Fister's cheap, but it's just this offense could really go off anytime. I know there's a bunch of righties in there, and Fister's struggles have really been against lefties this year, but he's been pretty solid, so I probably am still shying away from him, though.
Yeah, definitely with you. Next one, who get the Nationals and Diamondbacks, Archie Bradley versus Steven Strasburg. And Strasburg, I mean, your most expensive option. But I do think he offers up a great matchup against the Diamondbacks team that starting to get a little bit more healthy. I mean, obviously, Jake Lamb's back in lineup, David Peralta, but Strasburg, I mean, really tough on left-handers. I mean, a really low WOBA against him. So for me, I don't think this Diamondbacks offense is really any threat. And given that the fact that they also have a strikeout rate of 23% against righties, I think there's a ton of upside here for Strasburg, even despite kind of the bad ballpark factors.
Yeah, I hate his price tag, but he's probably going to be the most consistent guy out there tonight. And like you said, his price tag is really high, but you kind of got to almost play him in cash games just because he's been so solid. And I think a lot of people will shy away from him because it is the Diamondbacks and the ballpark factor, but I think that's going to be a mistake.
Yeah, and you just look at Strasburg. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want this, but you look at that Dodger outing. I mean, gave up 6 earned runs and 10 strikeouts, and still came away with a decent floor. I mean, that's the kind of potential he has, and he's a heavy favorite here. You imagine a lot of run support about coming off Bradley. So overall, I'm fine with Straws and cash. I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of the price tag. I kind of wish it sat either at 12,000 or in the 11K. I think that would be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. But what they're doing lately is you're going to have to pay up to get that floor. And I definitely would pay up for him on this slate just because there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, definitely. And on FanDuel, I mean, I don't mind on Strasburg. I mean, 11.6 isn't a bad price tag for him. It's a little bit easier to kind of work in bats on FD there.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot you can do on this slate with the poor pitching on DraftKings and using the second starter if you're going deep, a little bit lower price.
Yeah, definitely. And Archie Bradley on the other side, coming off a really strong start against Milwaukee. A bit of a different offense here. So for me, I'm just kind of fading.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really no need to play him, especially if you're going to play Strasburg.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at the next games here, you got the two last ones of the night, Brewers and Padres. And these lineups in the midst of trading guys, Matt Kemp out. And you also have Luke Roy, who might be gone by the 4 o'clock deadline, could be without Braun. Not that Kozar is a great arm. Not that Jimmy Nelson's a great arm, but I guess given the fact that these are two really bad offenses in a good park, you can make a case for them as SP2s. And really, for me, it's just SP2s only on DraftKings. I'm not really looking on FanDuel.
Yeah, I agree with you there. They're both pretty cheap, and like you said, you can kind of make a case either way. I think you got to really wait and see what the lineups are tonight before you make any decisions.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, I can see using Jimmy Nelson at that strikeout rate or of the Padres. I mean, 7,800 is a decent price there on DraftKings. I don't mind him in tournaments. I mean, he's one of those guys where I could, if I am working in a couple of other bats, maybe borderline cash, just given that the Padres offense is pretty weak.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really don't mind Jimmy Nelson in cash games. His price is nice, so you can kind of throw him in there. And it is still the San Diego Padres offense, and like you said, might be without Matt Kemp.
Yeah, definitely. So I think overall it's pretty weak. And Cozart, I mean, the other side, I mean, I guess if you wanted to punt down and kind of hope for 15 DraftKings points, which he's definitely capable of doing, I don't hate that either in tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. That price tag is so low, so you could stack a lot of bats. You pair him with Strasburg, and then you can basically do whatever you want on the offensive side.
Yeah, the good thing is, I mean, you pair him up with one of those high upside pitchers. I mean, you kind of hope, a Strasburg or Archer or Salazar has that 8 to 10 strikeout night to kind of help you out there.
Yeah, and you're not looking for much at his price tag, Cozart. So 15 fantasy points, I think on DraftKings you'd be pretty happy with.
Yep, definitely. Red Sox and Mariners next here. James Paxton versus Eduardo Rodriguez. Two lefties. I'm not particularly thrilled with the matchup or the prices of either of these guys. It's like I either rather spend up or kind of just dive down lower. And Safeco, I mean, hasn't really been the greatest of pitchers' parks, especially during the summertime. I mean, we've seen kind of home runs fly out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm staying away from both these pitchers. I oddly think they'll both have decent outings, but for their price tag and what you really need from DFS standards, it's really not going to do too much. And like you said, you look at Safeco, and I think they're still allowing the most home runs per game this season in the American League. So if not, they're number 2. They're at like 2.8. So I definitely am shying away from him, even though I think these two starters kind of could have a nice little outing. Paxton is okay because he doesn't give up too many home runs, but Eddie Rodriguez kind of gives up a little bit too many. And you look at that Mariners offense with Cruz, and you have Gutierrez, Dejo Lee, and all those guys could really hit him.
Yeah, that's my worry there. And Rodriguez, I mean, every now and then he'll have one of those starts where he loses a little bit of control, misses spots, and that's kind of the issue for me. And as you mentioned, those three right-handed names are something that I definitely a big concern. Especially Rodriguez. I mean, last 10 starts, he has only not allowed a home run once. Everything else, I mean, it's at least been one home run in that span. So definitely a little bit worrisome.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I had to, I'd probably play Paxton, but there's really no need to. And I'm just staying really far away from Eddie Rodriguez.
Yep, definitely in agreement with you there. That's going to wrap things up with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out DaveFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content.